Hello, AP. This video gives you an introduction to our study of Greek theater, of Sophocles the man, as well as an intro to our play, Oedipus the King. We began this morning by looking at this drawing. This is a typical Greek theater. You can see these types of structures all over Greece and Italy and Turkey, many of those areas. Now, not everything is still there. Most of the time, the area here, the audience area, the seats built into hillsides, those are still mostly intact. This floor area, known as the orchestra, where people acted, that is mostly intact. Unfortunately, the proscenium stage here, the big fancy stage, most of those are gone. But you can still see where the theaters were and how fancy and prominent and huge they really were in many, many cities. You notice down here on the orchestra section, you have a little podium that's really an altar. Sacrifice to Dionysus were given there. Back in the old days, the Dionysian religion incorporated what we call the chorus, chanting, singing, and so later on, maybe an actor delivered a part, or a preacher-like person, a priest, would deliver a part. And so theater really grew out of that worship of Dionysus, the god of wine and revelry, but he's also the god of nature in a lot of the older mythologies. And so to honor him and to honor that tradition, sometimes a sacrifice was made, sometimes it was actually a statue of Dionysus right here in the middle of the acting area, and the actors just had to work around it. So that's how the theaters looked back in those days. The next thing we did was to launch into a discussion of Sophocles' life. He was a poet, actor, military general, priest, and prominent public figure. Sophocles lived the life of an active and devoted Athenian citizen. He was born around 496 BC and died in 406 BC when he was 89 or 90 years old. During that time, he saw the rise and fall of his beloved Athens. As a young man, he witnessed the building of the Athenian Empire, but he lived long enough to see Athens wither and collapse as a result of its war against Sparta. Sophocles won many playwriting contests and even beat Aeschylus, the old playwright who introduced probably two people on stage. Sophocles introduced three people on stage. It's thought that the father of drama, Thespis, introduced the one character to interact with the chorus. Sophocles was heir to a tragic technique that the poet Aeschylus may have started. Aeschylus was perhaps the first playwright to write scenes between two characters, that is, two characters and the chorus. Previously, Greek tragedy consisted of a series of dialogues between a single actor and the chorus, interrupted by various choral odes or songs. The plays of Sophocles fall into three distinct periods. His earliest plays deal with ethical and moral issues, like Antigone, which is really the last one we're going to study in the sequence, but it's the first one that he wrote. Antigone focuses on the conflict between opposing moralities of what we today might call church versus state. In Antigone, one of Antigone's brothers is hailed to be a hero, the other a villain. The hero is given a state funeral. The villain is left out to rot. Antigone can't stand this, and so against orders, she goes out and performs a burial ceremony for her brother. And of course, she is condemned to death. Should she obey the gods, who state that everybody ought to have a burial and tradition, or does she obey her uncle Creon, now the king, who says anyone who does this will be put to death because that man was a traitor? Which is she going to choose? So the early plays deal with those kinds of things. The middle period is where we get our play under study now, Oedipus the King. In this middle period, Sophocles reaches a height of dramatic power because these plays concern the strengths and failings of specific characters rather than moral issues. Now, there's a moral issue in the background of Oedipus, where he's cursed to kill his father and wed his mother. But that's pre-play. That's before the play starts. This play is concerned with what does Oedipus do once he finds out the truth about his birth and about the life that he has led. So these plays are much more like a Shakespearean play. Shakespeare delves into characters, into psychology, what makes people tick. Sophocles' final plays, like Oedipus and Colonus, the middle play in the trilogy that I'll tell you about, we won't assign that to read. You can read it if you'd like to. But those final plays deal with the ultimate redemption of long-suffering heroes. Sophocles himself was getting old when he wrote those final plays, and so he wants to rescue some of his characters who have gone through a lot in his life, because Sophocles believed that he also had gone through a lot in his life. We took a look at a few of the pages in the book just to review a few things. Pages 15 and 16. This will give you an outline of things to go back and look at if you haven't already. Pages 15 and 16 talk about the relationship of the city-states to one another. Pages 16 and 17 talk about Athens and the glorious city of Athens and its relationship to other city-states. Pages 17 through 19 talk about Dionysus as an entity and his relationship to society. Page 19 is a general discussion of Greek theater. Page 20, the purpose of the chorus. Pages 21 and 22, the political motivation of Greek theater. And on page 24, of course, how Oedipus Rex is an example of dramatic irony, where we, the audience, certainly knows what's going on. And the story was an old story even when he wrote his play. So the audience knows what's going on with Oedipus, but Oedipus doesn't know what's going on with it. And so that is a good example of dramatic irony. We also discussed a very interesting situation, and that's the story of penguins and what penguins have to do with Oedipus. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, you need to go to page 147 and see about this Celtic story called Saint Mael in his magic stone boat. And now Saint Mael was all excited about becoming a Christian, but he had very bad eyesight. And so Saint Mael decided that he was going to get in his magic stone boat and go to an area where there weren't any Christians, teach them, preach, baptize them. Well, he ended up on an island full of penguins, but he didn't know what a penguin was. He thought it was just another kind of person, and he couldn't see very well either. And so St. Mael starts baptizing the penguins. Well, the celestial authorities have a fit, and God gives the angels the decision whether to turn the penguins into real people, making them subject to life and sin and fall from grace, and maybe a heaven, but also maybe a hell, or to leave them as penguins. And the angels vote to turn the penguins into people. And God shakes his head and said they would have been a whole lot better off left as penguins. And so page 147 talks about fate versus free will and how that ties into our Oedipus story. That yes, there are certain things that are set up that we can't control. We can't control really our birth. We can't control the parents. We can't control the gender. We can't control the socioeconomic status. Lots of things in life we can't control. But once that control factor is here, once the fate has been decided, what are we going to do with it? What decisions do we make? How much of your life is fated or designed or already established? And how much do you have control over? That's what this play is about. Oedipus has had a horrible background already set up for him by the gods. One of his ancestors killed a snake sacred to Apollo, and Apollo cursed the whole family for generations to occasionally kill their fathers and marry their mothers. So this has already happened before, a couple of generations before, in Oedipus's family. Here it is again. The cycle is starting up again. So all of that has happened before the play. Oedipus doesn't know why a plague has descended on his city. So in his very stubborn nature, he's determined to find out no matter the cause. He doesn't know he's responsible. The gods are punishing the city because he did what he did. But is he responsible for doing what he did? And even if he's not responsible, he is responsible for his actions once he finds out the truth. That's the key to the play. How does he act? What brings about his fall? Because it is a tragedy. Our hero, our main character, must fall. And so go ahead, work on the study guide questions for Antigone, and we'll see a different perspective. Creon in our first play is a very fair-minded individual who's accused by Oedipus of very false things. But by the time we get to Antigone, Creon has become the tyrant that Oedipus is in the first play. So continue your reading.